Hey everybody, welcome back to Integrative Psychonautics. Hope you've been doing well out there. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about something very important for you to understand if you want to know kind of how healing works, how therapy works, how personal growth, personal transformation works. I want to discuss something that is, I think, very little understood in the therapy world because there are kind of biases about different modalities. And that is what I notice as kind of two general directions that we can go in which we can have a transformational, true healing experience. So let me explain that to you. So for any of you who don't really know much about my history or my training as a hypnotherapist, as a coach, as an NLP practitioner and all that, let me share a little bit about kind of my journey, and that'll kind of help to set up this understanding here and how I'm arriving at what I'm sharing with you guys. So I've mostly had to self-educate. I was in a situation where essentially I had a lot of issues. I had all these psychedelic experiences. I had these really profound moments of high function and big breakthrough and spiritual experiences. And then a lot of kind of unhealthy patterns in myself, patterns of emotion, patterns of thought, patterns of behavior that were a stark contrast to these kind of peak experiences that I had. And that kind of set me out on this journey of studying personal development in order to learn how to resolve this conflict inside of myself, this kind of gap inside of myself. So along the way, I've taken up this habit of being very autodidactic, very self-educating. And so I've picked up a lot. I've kind of ended up learning a wide array of kind of views on therapy and psychology and spirituality and personal development and personal growth, and from neuroscience to kind of non-duality to like a whole wide range of things. And this is something that I actually, really love about this process I've been on, really love about my background and my perspective, is that I find I'm often kind of cross-trained in a lot of ways that sometimes when I'm talking to other coaches or other therapists, they may not share that with me. They may not be as broadly educated in all these different kind of views and vantage points on what it means to heal, to transform, to grow, to awaken, to yada, yada, right? So all of this is to say that where I'm coming from and what I'm about to share here with you is based on what I've been seeing on my viewpoint, based on all these kind of various approaches to especially studying therapy and transformative or transformational therapy in specific. It's probably worth saying and just kind of highlighting as a quick point here, not all therapy is transformational. Not all therapy is really designed to help you resolve something or heal or change it. There are other therapies that are much more superficial or much more about coping or much more about symptom management, right? I've been very interested on this deep level. How do we rewire and really change things? And I think a lot of that has been driven by my early psychedelic experiences and feeling so deeply into my own being and realizing that change is possible at this deep kind of core level that I think a lot of therapists who have never had the benefit of psychedelics maybe don't fully understand, haven't fully wrapped their heads around. Okay, enough tooting my own horn here. The reason I'm saying all this is to say that what I'm about to share here in terms of these two directions of healing is based on being kind of really broadly cross-trained. Now, what I've noticed, and just to kind of bring this around, is that there are two ways that we can go and have a healing transformational experience. In my experience, most of therapy tends to focus on one of these two ways, and most of the therapy world isn't aware of the other option. So let me explain what those are to you a bit, and I'll explain, how we determine which way to go, which might be useful for you. Just, again, for your own knowledge, so you understand that there are different ways to get towards our central goal. If our central goal is something like deep healing, deep transformation, rewriting the programs in our unconscious mind, unwiring the conditioning that's kind of ruled us, resolving our early childhood experiences, having corrective experiences, however you want to think of that. There's a lot of different language and framing from different schools of thought around that. Having a leveling up, a spiritual awakening, a spiritual growth experience that lasts, that sticks. there are these two directions. So let me explain each, and then again, I'll tie in how to know to do both. So the first direction is, let's say, towards the pain, right? Towards going into the issue, going into the problems, the pain, the fear, the thing we've been avoiding. And this is how most therapy is done, including like the deeper end of a lot of somatic therapy, right? So a lot of therapy really revolves around a couple core ideas. Essentially, that the reason that your issue remains present for you is that you're engaging in some form of avoidance around it. This could be avoidance at the level of thought. This could be avoidance at the level of emotion and feeling. This could be avoidance at the level of somatics, of felt sense in the body. And sometimes people will be, perhaps very intellectually understanding of their issue, but still not be willing to feel the feelings that go with it, this kind of a thing, right? And so a lot of therapeutic work is essentially this idea that we stop the avoidance pattern. We go into directly addressing whatever's present in this pattern for us, whether it's fear, whether it's grief, whether it's sadness, stress, overwhelm, et cetera, et cetera. We work through that. We process it in one of many different techniques. And then on the back end of processing that, once it's kind of released, let go, completed, then what tends to happen is we have this emerging kind of resource state, whether that's a new way of understanding the issue or a new relationship to ourself or a new relationship to life, or maybe just a very strong positive feeling or a sense of peace or a sense of freedom. We get this kind of resource state that emerges on the back end after we've kind of done some work of processing, digesting, working through, not avoiding the issue. So we go towards the pain, we process through, we come out the other side with some sort of a resource state, some sort of a completion. And usually what this means is that when that's done fully, that whatever the issue was will feel no charge anymore. It'll feel like it's a thing of the past. It'll feel like not a big deal. It'll essentially have recategorized itself automatically in our brain, in our unconscious mind, and we'll no longer really have that issue kind of dominating our experience. And this can be, let's be honest, profound, deep, be very challenging, obviously, but it can also be very rewarding, very beautiful, very rich with meaning, rich with depth, with emotion, with resolution, with healing, right? And so this is the way most transformational therapies approach it. So if we're looking at like trauma therapy, somatic experiencing, EMDR, well, no, not EMDR, but a bunch of approaches, this is really what we're at with it. What we're up to is going into the problem first and processing through that with the support of the and resourcing of the therapist, and then we kind of come out the other side. The other path that a lot of therapists don't know about is that we actually go towards a resource first, right? So you go towards some happy memory or some thing is really true and really positive and empowering about yourself or about life, some sort of spiritual experience you've had, some sort of capacity you have for patience or love or compassion, and you really light up and you really like re-access and get in touch with the resource first, right? So it's resource first, problem first, right? Different sequence here. Then as you're really in touch with the resource state and you really feel it, you feel empowered, you feel motivated, you feel deeply at peace, you feel safe in your own body, you feel deep well-being, deep patience, whatever it is, then with that resource online and present inside of you, then you start to bring that back to bear on whatever the problem is, the pain, the fear, the grief, the depression, the anxiety, what have you. So we bring the resource to the problem, and then lighting up both those neural networks at the same time essentially will start to unwind the problem, because now you're bringing in this whole other contrasting state that doesn't compute with grief or depression or anxiety, and so when you bring these contrasting neural networks together, it starts to take out all the kind of charge and the emotion and the pain and the stuff out of the problem, and that tends to ultimately collapse it, process it through, bring it down to nothing. This is essentially the work of the science behind it is what's called memory reconsolidation work. There's a branch of therapy called coherence therapy, and this is the principle upon which a lot of modern transformational therapies work. So things like EMDR, for example, EFT tapping, for example, there's a bunch of others, and even somatic experiencing, hypnotherapy can really be used in either direction. But, they can often be used to resource the person first, use a resource to process the problem, transform the problem. And then once the problem's transformed, usually there's, again, a resource on the back end of that emerges as well. So we have these two different directions, towards the pain, towards the resource, towards the issue, towards the, a positive state first. So these are the two directions. And again, most people don't know about this second one, right? Most people don't know about that you can use a positive resource state first and then use that to transform issues. Some therapists kind of implicitly understand this, but if you really unpack what's often happening in a transformational session, this is often what's at play. And we can kind of make the argument here for discussion's sake that, there's always always has to be a resource present in order for transformation to happen. It's just that in the more traditional models of therapy, the resource might be the therapist. The resource might be the therapist's patience and kindness and comfort and presence and, attunement and all of that, right? So often it's the presence of the therapist that is the resource that makes it possible to go into the pain safely and effectively and work through it. Conversely, when we're looking at resource first, what I mean is a resource state inside the person who's doing the therapy, inside of you, right? So there is a distinction there of where the resource lies. But I think, one way of looking at this would be to consider that there's always a resource there of some form. So last question here to address, then we'll wrap the video. How do we know which way to go? What's right for you? How do we do, when do we do what's appropriate? And this is, I think something that's ultimately determined by your nervous system and by what tendency it's leaning in, right? So this is where, in my training as a hypnotherapist, we're trained a lot into very subtly tracking and being attuned to what's going on with the client, what's going on in their body, what's the whole communication of their nervous system. Is it wanting to go into the pain? Is it kind of like, no, we need to go deal with this, we need to process this, and the person's kind of frightened of that, but that's what the nervous system seems to want to do? Or is it more like the nervous system really wants to go into a blissful, happy, empowered, peaceful place first? So who decides where we go, or how do we know which way to go? We listen, we tune in. What's the nervous system leading us to do? Now, to tie this into psychedelics for a moment, maybe you can see how this starts to fit in with psychedelic work here. A lot of times in a psychedelic session, sometimes you take the medicine and you just go into a bliss state. You're having ecstasy, you're having joy, you're having compassion, you're having love. And I've had people reach out to me. I've had clients who reach out to me and they're like, help, I'm having this problem. Every time I take psychedelics, I can't think about my issues. I can't think about my problem. I can't address my depression because all I feel is bliss and ecstasy. Well, maybe that's what your nervous system wants to do first, and have online first and really integrate first in order to be able to do that work with your depression, right? Other way around. Sometimes people take, psilocybin or what have you, and what's immediately present as soon as the medicine comes online is grief, sorrow, anxiety, fear. All of a sudden the nervous system is already going towards the problem, right? In which case, instead of trying to fight that, steer it back towards feeling good, why don't we just work with what the nervous system, the intelligence of the nervous system is already presenting as where it wants to go, right? So who decides which way is right? I would argue, from my point of view, like a really flexible therapist would work with whatever's emerging. And this is probably the right way to relate to the person's system, you know? So as your system wants to go in a particular direction, instead of fighting it or trying to work against it, or again, kind of control, abandon, you know, redirect it, if we're just listening and tuning in and we are trusting that it's showing us what it needs as its medicine, that I've found generally tends to lead us in the right direction that's most productive. So just thought I'd share this with you guys as a bit of education for anyone out there who's kind of interested in psychedelic therapy or transformation or healing, wants to know more about it, or wants to know how I see it. These are the two different directions of healing. Both of these will lead you to a same place of resolution and completion. They're just different paths to get there based on, again, what your nervous system needs or expresses or is kind of tending towards in the moment. So just that I'd share. Hope this is useful. And if you like this video, do me the usual favor of liking. You know, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, you like this content, please do subscribe. I'm happy to have you aboard. And if you have any questions or comments, do leave them down below. I'm always happy to have a chat with you guys. Much love. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.